And we're live. Thank you everyone for joining us again on another NPM Open RFC call. Today's date is Wednesday, March 24th, 2021. We'll be following along in the agenda that was posted in the RFC's repo, issue number 346. And just in case you haven't already got access to it, I will be copying and pasting, spamming the HackMD meeting notes doc. Feel free to add yourselves as attendees there. Quick reminder, these calls and all communication on the Open RFC or on the RFC repos is covered under our code of conduct. But we just ask that you please be kind and mindful on these calls as other folks are speaking. If you'd like to add or comment while someone is talking, please raise your hand and we'll call on you. And I guess quickly, some announcements from our side. We cut NPM version 7.7 yesterday and have actually floated a few patches since then. And in V7.7, we actually shipped some net new capabilities for NPM run and the run script suite of commands, as well as NPM exec to be workspace aware. So 2 new configs were introduced, workspaces and workspace, which essentially help you filter and run, utilizing those configs, you can help you essentially run those commands against your workspaces. So pretty awesome. That shipped yesterday, and we're still doing our best to stay on top of feedback. And so feel free to try it out. Let us know how that's going. And we'll be rolling out more commands that essentially should be workspace aware as sort of the weeks roll on here, with hope that we will be done that second phase of sort of workspace work come sort of the second week of April, ideally. So that's the big announcement from us. Did anybody on the call have any news or announcements that they wanted to share? If not, I know we have a light group today. Most of the folks, as I mentioned earlier, offline are either on PTO, STO, or just out of the office. So it's just myself from the core team here. But yeah, wanted to still dive into some of the items that we had queued up. I had initially, jumping into the agenda, initially outlined 3 RFCs that have been waiting to sort of be ratified and accepted. I think given the folks we have today, we might want to sit on this for another week and just agree to keep it open and actually accept them for now. These are the overrides RFC, the registry protocol, and then also essentially the phase 2 RFC for the workspaces work that we're shipping today. And are throughout these next few weeks. And so, yeah, I'll just keep them essentially on the agenda unless folks had any comments they wanted to make on any of those 3 RFCs. If not, then we can move on to the PR RFC 2912. So find NPM5 dupes. Pretty print. So I don't necessarily know, this is actually a PR that somebody's opened to change the output of find dupes. I think Roy had originally queued this up just to give some visibility on what this change was looking like. So essentially, because we would also ship this as a sort of a minor release or in a minor release, because it does change the output here. I can copy and paste for folks to easily find it. Oh, thanks for the note there, Wes. I did not see that. Anonymous edit should be available now if you'd like to edit the HackMD doc. So yeah, so PR number 2912. Yeah, I think this was just for visibility. We're going to keep this open for a little bit and just figure out if this is actually something we want to like pull in. Anybody have comments on this? this change of the output. Go ahead, Jordan.
Oh, I was going to say, it seems helpful. It just reminds me of how annoying it is that I can't tell NPM to stop removing packages when I install, but it's still more useful to tell me what it's doing that I don't like.
Right. Yeah. This, I think, is another good example. We've actually been seeing an uptick, and I say this anecdotally without the actual metrics to back it up, but the metrics probably do exist. We're seeing an uptick in at least contributions. So I feel like we've been making a lot of good headway with just cleaning up the code base to a point where people feel like they can jump in and add things. And this is a great, I think, example of, somebody identifying a pain point, developer experience sort of pain point, and making the change easily, and yeah, the quality of life sort of experience should get better here and improved over time. So hopefully we're going to see a lot more of this kind of stuff. I know we've been talking a lot about like what output looks like and the design of and language we're using in the output from npm. I think this is a good example of that as well. Like let's improve the experience, make it more clear about what's actually happening to the end user, and actually give them actionable, something actionable as well is a top of mind for us. Like especially with we were hearing a lot of feedback with like the peer dependency installation by default, that logging the error we give with eResolve conflicts, and errors, was not as actionable as it could have been. I think this is, something we want to keep in mind as we go along here. So cool. Feel free to give feedback in PR itself if we think that there's anything we'd want to change, but we might just land it as is, unless there's something specific we want to change, I think, about the UI.
I think the only thing for me is that like typically I expect relatively structured columns in npm, but I think that's unrelated to
Yeah.
this PR.
That's one thing that I was also going to give feedback in the PR itself was, yeah, just the we could clean up the how it looks visually.
Yeah.
I think it's
Does it support --JSON?
I feel like today, I think.
Yeah.
Yeah, it should support
like I think in general we should make sure that any output that npm spits to the console is also somehow consumable in JSON form. It's very like disappointing when I'm happily working through some of those commands and then one of them suddenly doesn't have it. So it'd be really nice if this one did.
I would love to know which ones aren't doing that today, and we can make a list of sort of paper.
It's been a while since I've tried, but I'll let you know.
Okay, cool. Yeah, if you come across them, let's start a list, and like we can put them down as paper cuts to like clean that up, because I totally agree that we should have that. That should be sort of a standard of all output for. Okay, so moving on to the second item that we had, RFC 339. So improving the suggestions. Nilf unfortunately isn't here again, and Isaac had sort of followed up and made a comment on this RFC. We've made some headway here already. So again, if you go and you get the latest npm, you're going to actually see some better output today, some more actionable output for when we essentially are doing some like did you mean code. So the default behavior of all for run script is going to actually fall back and check against any scripts that we might think are similar to what you've given us as input. We use the same type of logic, I think, that we had in help search before. And so this RFC actually, we've semi-implemented at least the run script examples. And we could, I don't know if we've implemented anything in exec yet that is similar to this, but it's definitely something we're trying to improve. So that's essentially just an update there, is that we have shipped some quality of life improvements there with the logging. So any comments, thoughts on those?
I like it and I think it's good.
Do it.
You know.
Do it yesterday.
Yeah.
Have it. Yeah.
And no comment here is a sign of approval from me, at least. It's an
Okay.
exciting one.
No comment is good. Good comments.
Mhm.
So moving on to the other RFC that Nilf has had or created for us after some internal discussion about npm config. So this is RFC 336. So adding a where flag to npm config. I'll just copy and paste this in there. And so the thought behind this is today it seems very weird that we're not able to modify set and get config, or sorry, set config locally to npm RC files that are at the project level. And so introducing within the V7 major band here, some way for you to configure npm config to interact with the project level npm RC file is sort of what we're trying to accomplish here, as well as sort of delineate between these four areas that we are context that we have today in our docs and actually in npm client, the client itself. So the built-in configs that we have versus global user and project level configs, and just really explicitly defining those in a new option. I don't know if the name of it is I think last week we talked about maybe the name not being the best, or it's a little bit too verbose, or not. It would be better to be more verbose, I think, is some of the feedback we had before. So where might not be the right term we use in the end, but yeah. Jordan, I see your hands up. Did you?
Yeah, I mean, so stepping back from the RFC, when I use npm config set in particular, less so with get, but with set, about 99.9% of the time, I want to set it in the project level RFC, and 0.1% of the time, I want to set it at the user level one, and 0 of the time anywhere else. So while the where thing under whatever name seems like a good step to that, and it might be better to go with that sort of match the data model of npm approach. It almost seems like just a flag that says like in the current project, right, would actually satisfy the majority use case. Because like generally speaking, the only thing that should ever really go outside your project npm RC is your auth. And virtually everything, there's a few tiny things like whether you see a loading indicator or something, but virtually everything else, like it is actively harmful to have it outside your project directory, because then your other coworkers on the project can't, have a different setting than you. So yeah, I mean, so this seems fine. It moves us towards that goal also, but I'm wondering if maybe we want to do something a little more targeted, unless there are actually use cases where people dearly want to use npm config set with a location that isn't the current project.
So I think, and that's great feedback, because, and I think you're right. So it's funny, if we walk that back to the very first comment you made, you're saying that npm config is 99% of the time wrong for you today and like not useful.
npm config set specifically, yeah.
Yes, set, sorry, yes. Get, that's great. So yeah, set today is being underutilized, probably because we don't have any way to configure it to look in one place or another, right? Like, so well, -G, sorry, I think it lets you do globally. So yeah, I think we're trying to thread the needle here a little bit and allow for, we want the default to be project level, but we can't make that change because it'll be a breaking change until npm 8. So I think that allowing for, let's say, these other, because we also already have a understanding of a system level npm RC file as well as a user level npm RC file. I think it would make sense that you're able to, at least in one config or option, be able to set which one you'd like to npm config to be looking at and setting.
Yeah, I mean, I think that's a reasonable argument. I think that in either case, it's a semver minor way to move towards the semver major of changing the default, which I completely agree with. That is the ultimate goal. And I'm not super concerned with which stepping stone gets us there. But like the system level NPM RC, my understanding is that like 6 DevOps people like use that and rely on it, and maybe NPM itself, and like nobody else. And like, because there's like 4 locations, right? There's user, there's project, there's global, and then there's like the NPM binary itself, right? Mm-hmm. And that last one nobody knows about and nobody uses, but it's there. And the system one, I would also expect that anyone who's using it doesn't want the user to be able to do it, to change it easily, and probably is using permissions to prevent that anyway. So it's just not a use case. And then similar, and then so it's just user and project. And like, again, I think the use case for user is auth, which is already put there, and like minor display level things like the spinner or whatever, and that's it. And so like, and I think that I would be very surprised if anyone else actually, you know, I guess maybe registry, if you work at a company, your like internal registry would go there. So there's like a few options, and so that supports the where approach, but it's it seems like it's kind of burying the lead about the real purpose here, which is that almost every time people want to change the project NPM RC, and virtually nobody cares about the rest of them. It's like ideologically consistent to have them all, and so cool. But I don't know. Anyway, that's just my thoughts. I'll let Jeremy.
Go ahead, Wes.
Okay.
I think you're breaking up, Wes.
Just going to add, even if you're at a company and you're using registry, that's also probably, yeah, I figured I would. Okay, it's fine. I'll just listen.
Okay, that was.
Wait, Wes, no, I just took a bite of a bagel. You need to keep talking.
Well, what I inferred from Wesley's broken up audio was that even at a company, if the registry is in the user level or system level, you also wouldn't want users to easily change that, because you only want them to get it from the company registry.
Right.
That makes sense.
Sort of. I don't know if my audio.
I'm just buying time for bagel.
Yeah, we're buying time for you
working,
to get to a Wi-Fi access
I was
point.
going to say, even if
Wes,
if you set it at that level, that's probably need project in that.
So maybe you can write out the feedback, Wes, and we can yeah, speed up the internet. Yeah, if you want to write in chat, Wes, if you can, like the feedback you had, and we can just repeat it here for you. It's pretty choppy and delayed for sure. So yeah, go ahead, Tierney.
The other thing I just wanted to say there is like the only time I have ever had to use npm config set or set config set was like when I am setting up my own local machine, and like I'm going to be publishing personal modules, and I do want to set the global of like, you know, when I init, I want to be MIT, and when I prefer starting at version 1 rather than at like, I think it starts at 0.1, which is a weird place to start anyway.
It starts at 1.0 now for a number of versions.
Oh, nice. That's
like
great.
Since NPM 3 or something.
Oh, okay. Maybe that's just very old.
But that's no, that like that use case is a perfect counter argument to what I was saying, because
and like setting author email and stuff and that stuff, like there's a bunch of tutorials. I is my camera garbage right now? It looks very blurry to
pretty
me.
Blurry.
Okay. Don't know why, sorry. Yeah, that's just the use case that I have for that, is like every time I run a new machine, I run those commands to get that set up. And I imagine there is a lot of codified content around run npm config set, you know, author or init.author, I think, and stuff like that. So do you want to go ahead and read Russ's point out, Darcy?
Yeah, I can do that. And then I'm gonna take a few notes here as well. So Wes is just following up here in chat saying, his point is that even if someone sets a registry at the user global level, it is likely that there's going to be misuse, and it needs to be set in all projects as well. So to be quite honest, he thinks that we should probably print out the registry when it's not in the public or on all installs, but that is another topic. So this, I think, speaks to actually, the other RFC that we just had, that Neil brought up in terms of just making clearer and better output from our commands. This, I think somebody has actually added as a patch somewhere along the lines there, the ability to print out the registry you're logging into in npm login, which was a good example of this kind of, I think, feedback that Wes is giving to make it clear, what registry you're configured to. But yeah, the other parts there about the user versus global level registry config, like, this is something that I run into myself. I use all three different npm RC files for different things, like whether it be my just for different config, similar to also what you were saying, Tierney. I have like custom init config for the user level, but that might change the npm RC file, and my project level config can override that. So Jordan, you have your hand up.
Yeah, so from hearing more about those extra use cases, which make perfect sense, I just hadn't thought about, for me, I disable package lock in every project, and I set version and message in every project so that I can do auto npm version stuff the way I like. I'm wondering if, given an arbitrary config value, there's really only one canonical place it ever should go. Like init stuff makes no sense in an existing project, right? For example, kind of only makes sense at the user level. Registry, based on Wes's comment, kind of only makes sense per project, although you maybe could set it at the user or system level, right? And so maybe if we did a quick scan of all those config values, we could decide an optimal location or locations for each value, and then warn the user when they're setting a value in a non-optimal location, and then tell them how to use the where or whatever command to set it in the correct location. Because if we do that, then we've kept the data model and gone basically exactly with Nil's approach, regardless of the spelling of where. But we've also gently pushed everyone towards whatever the correct location is conceptually for the config value they're trying to set, which makes it probably much less disruptive in NPM 8 or whatever when the default changes. Does that? And we could even have where equals auto or something where it like picks the optimal location. And that way you never have to think about it. You just say where is auto, and then you trust NPM about where each config value belongs.
You could even have a config option for where defaults to.
Right. Well, you would automatically. So I like at that point, I would probably set at the user level npm config where to auto, and then I wouldn't have to think about it anymore. npm config set would just do the right thing every time.
Yeah. No, I agree with that. I think that's a good idea.
Okay. Yeah, it seems like a little non-deterministic, like with the little bit of magic there in terms of what control. Like, I actually like it when that we're like the npm highly configurable, but we're very, very dumb in a lot of places. Like, we just take what you've given us and put it in places. But I do like what you're saying there, Jordan, in terms of mapping what we think the default place for should be. For us, and we'd
still respect the where setting, right? We'd still put it wherever the user asked. We'd just give them a little notice that says, hey, just in case, like, go read this link and it'll tell you why we think the correct location is X, right? And it's non-deterministic in the sense that you have to refer to a lookup, but the lookup is hard-coded and deterministic.
Right. I think this would also help in terms of like providing this kind of like metadata into our docs for the configs themselves. I think we could make our docs better about like to tie these things together right now, because these 4 locations right now of where you can can have npm RC files and how we respect them. Like, not a lot of people know this information, and not a lot of people know like why they would, why they would set this value at the project level versus the like the user level versus like, across your system, right? Like,
yeah, I mean, for NVM, I had to dig through NPM code and talk to Isaac multiple times to be able to get the implementation correct. So it's definitely not trivial.
Yeah. Okay. So I'll take some notes here as well. I'm gonna probably, because I'm doing things solo. I might actually update the notes after the call as well, just so folks, if you don't see me typing now, it doesn't mean I'm not gonna backfill the meeting notes. So, but yeah, I really like that feedback, Jordan. That's a great idea. So we'll capture that and see if we can actually maybe modify the RFC to include some of those ideas. Like the auto is an interesting concept. It seems like we would want to block this implementation from that like discovery work on what and that mapping or that matrix of the config versus like what,
Right, like auto could be added later. The important part is the suggestion and the optimal locations.
Yeah.
Auto is just kind of an easy thing to add once you have those.
Yeah. Okay.
The other feedback I want to give about the name itself. The only reason I would push back on where is because for the reason that all npm config values are global, it's super weird and confusing when you want to use a config name for a different command because it makes sense there, but it's already kind of claimed by another one. And where is so broad that like I can see any number of commands wanting to use that and it wouldn't, and not taking those exact same values. And like that to me suggests that we should make the name much more granular so that it's like scoped to config set or config get or whatever.
Yeah, config location. You could literally be as config dash
yeah,
location.
Config location would be perfectly granular enough.
Right, and we've done the same with init config, as even Tierney has said here, like the init dash author, init dash configs are all scoped that way. So not scope, but they're named that way and prefixed that way to try to be overtly verbose. So awesome. So let's move on. I want to keep so this RFC by Tierney, the npm audit license. I re-added this to the agenda after you brought it up last week to try and make sure we kept visibility on this. This is 182 npm audit licenses. This is something, you're not the only person that has ever brought this up to us. I don't know if there's been any comments in the last
I don't think
week.
there has been.
No.
Which is fine. Yeah, I'm not in any rush for it. I would love to see it progress. I'm happy to do the work. I just need to know what those steps are to like, what the actual steps from the npm team are that would be desired. Since there is some feedback about like licensee and stuff, and like I don't know if we want to go down the path of just straight up depending on licensee or using their format and writing our own like parsing of it or whatever that is. I'm happy to write it. Or we could go down the path of what I've written, which is like relatively different and more complex. I think it's more complex. I could be wrong though. But yeah, I would just really like to see some kind of license reporting as a fundamental feature of npm.
So I agree, but like most of licensee is already, I think, like most of its dep graph is already dependent on npm. A former npm employee who's an IP lawyer wrote licensee.
Yep.
So I'm kind of like, and I've already used licensee at a previous employer for exactly this purpose.
Mm-hmm.
And the benefit is that like the way it already is set up to allow explicit overrides, which is great. So I can say legal doesn't care about this thing, or it doesn't apply, or they forgot a license, but really it, they meant it to be MIT. And so we're going to count that, right? But then it also lets you point to shared corrections so that you can crowdsource that, and that already exists. So there's basically everything that was in Airbnb's dependency graph that like has that kind of, that was intended to be licensed that way and just was missing the exact correct, metadata to market as such, like
Yep.
that's already in that public package.
Well,
Right.
and there's also cases where people I've been told this by someone who formerly worked at Google, who worked at Google at the time. If you include MIT in your package JSON, but don't actually include the MIT license, that can be a bit skeevy for like, you know, a megacorp, because it's like you're saying it's MIT, but you're not actually licensing it appropriately.
Right, which is why individual companies will need the ability to determine that for themselves, because it's all dependent on their own legal team's comfort level. But
Yeah, the definition of passing that test, basically. It's like
right, and I mean the reason that it's so ambiguous, as we know, is because this stuff basically hasn't been tested in court, so nobody actually knows if the author says it's MIT is sufficient, even if it wasn't like properly licensed. But like, you know, some lawyers are say, well, that's sufficient signal to me, you know, and that a court would accept that, and some say, no, I'm not comfortable with that unless it meets the precise terms. And you know, so in other words, the ability to have these per project but also shareable corrections is very critical. And I don't know, I haven't looked into the tool you've got, but like licensee already has all these things.
Yeah, and so for what it's worth, like I built my own tool that was separate from that, and then that led to me proposing this as a, like, there is a structure that I proposed that NPM should implement.
Right.
That is separate from my own tool. Yeah, and so I very intentionally kind of structured it in a way. I don't care. I don't care what the solution is. I'm entirely happy for us to vendor, or not. I keep saying vendor. I don't know where that came from. I like for us to depend on licensee. That's fine with me. Assuming it's also fine with that former the maintainer of it. But yeah, like you know, I would love to see that. Just any ability to do licensing tooling at all would be nice. I guess the one thing I would say is like, is there anything that licensee doesn't do that we would like it to do? And like, does it meet like what consumers of such a function, a feature would want? And if it does, awesome, cool, that's fine. Just depend on licensee. The other thing I'd say is if we did do it with licensee, I'd like to see, rather than a .licensee.json, just have that object in a package JSON. Or like somehow figuring out what the structure of how to adapt that .licensee.json file is. I would prefer, if we're vendoring it, I would prefer it not to be a .licensee file. It feels weird for NPM to like be exposing.
You have
I agree.
You want an abstraction, like,
Yeah.
and I think what you were trying to propose there, like in terms of an abstraction layer on top of whatever, you don't care what's under the hood and what we're using. But yeah, I understand kind of where your head's at there.
Yeah.
Well, and I could easily see us making an npm config value that where the default is package JSON, and it finds the config in there, and you can override it to point to a file, which can be named whatever you want, which would mean that anyone currently using licensee could just set the config value in their project npm RC and point it to licensee.json, but then new users by default would put it in package JSON. You know, and we may want it, there's reasons to put it in a separate file, code owners, but like, you know, because you want to control it, but also like it'll inflate the size of the document potentially.
I mean,
and
also
things
have to
like
think
that,
about workspaces, right? So like if
Correct.
each package has its own thing, like do you want that in a, do you want to propagate that down from the top package JSON, or do you want to there's three things.
Right.
But like,
but I think that's solvable with any approach, and I think it's a super valid point, right? We shouldn't automatically expose the internal implementation name.
Yeah. The end, like, I don't know, I if there's justification needed, so far I've not heard anything, and I doubt anyone thinks this isn't a necessary thing, but like literally every single package that's in that has multiple thousands of downloads, and some of them have hundreds of thousands of downloads. So like license checker seems to be the most used, which is maintained by David Glass, who is wonderful. But yeah, you know, I think that there is like a very demonstrated need for this. There's also companies that have started around this concept. So yeah, I don't know. I would very much like to see this. I don't care how it's implemented, or don't care how we get there, just that it gets implemented.
Agreed. So we'll keep it on the agenda for now. See if we evolve this Yeah, go ahead.
Just one call to action for it though, Tierney, is, so you said like if licensee doesn't do anything that we want it to do, right? That's a useful question to ask about whatever implementation choice we pick. So I think that requires us enumerating the things we want it to do, and then we can answer that question.
Yeah. Yeah. No,
And maybe like if you feel like, if someone feels like doing the extra work, making like a nice comparison table of like, here are the, you know, Tierney's thing, I forget the name of it, licensee, and like, you know, you mentioned license tracker and a few others, and then just compare and contrast and show what features they have and don't, and then like that can help us inform us.
Yeah. Okay, I can do that.
Cool. So moving on then to our RFC, the optional install issue 156. I think we left this, I left this open and I'll copy paste the issue for folks, specifically because the ask here, was this open last week? I think the ask here was for different types of dependencies to be installable. So like creating almost like groups or aliases that then you could do a filtered install. I believe PNPM has filtered installs. So one interesting sort of, I guess, update on this discussion, and that I sort of added, was that this kind of capability can be unlocked with workspaces once we add filtering to npm install, which we're actually working on today. So what that means is that when you provide one of the two configs that I listed before that we've implemented in npm 7.7 is a specific workspace that you want to actually install, then when you define that, you do npm, let's say npm install -w static, and that's a workspace. We will install just those dependencies. We'll still resolve the tree the same way, but we'll essentially only reify the dependencies, which I believe sort of walks, is a solution that essentially meets the need of what this person has been asking for, without introducing net new grouping or filtering capabilities, at least today. So currently they mentioned, you know, the production flag that we have, and sort of open up discussion about increasing the types of filters that could be created. So I'm not sure if any other folks had thoughts around this, but it was definitely an interesting discussion that I thought, you know, we're trying to address, at least with the workspace work we're doing right now. So
it seems interesting. I don't have any particular objections.
I'm sure like lots of folks have installed deps that they don't need or didn't want to, or didn't even need to install during npm install. So that's, you know, use case that we know is only going to get worse as people adopt workspaces more and more, and as we allow for you to essentially install all of those workspaces. Very, very large projects are going to have this problem, and we're trying to address it, at least with filtered installs. So cool. So moving on then, if there's no other comments there, and again, that capability should be coming in a few weeks. So just be mindful and sort of reiterate the timeline there. This is ideally, you know, landing very soon. The RFC 343, which is one of Roy's RFCs, unfortunately couldn't make it today, is this concept of switching, automatically switching the context based on your current working directory for workspaces. He created this, I think, just this past week, so there hasn't been a discussion. So feel free to add notes there, unless folks on the call have any comments they want to make.
I mean, I guess from reading that PR, it seems like that's how it, like, why doesn't it already do that by default? Like there's a package JSON in the workspace. So if you type npm install in npm install package in there, it should just go to that package JSON. Like it may not do that now, but I'm wondering like why doesn't it? That seems like the only thing it should do.
So I think the difference here is that with, and I'm gonna have to get him to maybe explain his thought process here, but this was essentially, I think, to codify essentially what's happening today. So it's more so that like, it's more so like we want to lament this into, into our artifacts.
Okay, then that makes sense to me, right? Because basically like once you've CD'd into a workspace, the fact that it's in a, do we pick a term for the thing that the repo that contains workspaces?
No, we could call them children. We could call them,
well, yeah. So
projects.
the parent workspace and the child workspaces. When you CD into a child workspace,
root, we call it the roots, and yeah, I guess we call it. There's the root and then workspaces. Yeah.
Okay, so
CD into a workspace.
Yeah, for me the workspace is the root. But anyway, so I'm going to say stick with child and parent for this discussion. So when you CD into the child, there's a package JSON in there. NPM should have no concept whatsoever that it's inside a parent workspace. It shouldn't be able to know because like there's a package JSON there. It's a package, right? Similarly, if I put a package JSON under slash and add workspaces to it, that shouldn't break every package on my machine. So if it does already work this way, and this is just documenting it, I don't know why we need an RFC to do that, but sounds good. Like I'm on board.
So I think, sorry, when I say documenting the way it is now, and this is now I'm remembering the internal discussion we had. When running commands inside of a workspace, we are currently not aware of the fact that you're running them inside of a workspace project. We only see what, as you said, there's a package JSON there running.
And we shouldn't be.
Yeah, and so like this is the proposal, is to be like, should we walk the tree up and see if you're inside of, if there's a workspace definition that maps to the current working directory, and run that command that you just ran as if it was run in the root of your workspace. And then because we're introducing all these commands, because the concern is that for the majority cases when folks are, let's say, CDing into a workspace folder inside their project, they go in there and they run install, and now they've generated a lock file within that folder, whereas like we actually only want to be generating that, that might be the intention, true, right? Like we don't know what the intention was, but for the majority use case, I think what people expect is that that they would have run as if they were scoped, let's say, to that specific workspace. So npm install -w, my current workspace directory name, would be the expectation of how that ran, how that command was run. So.
Yeah. So despite my like strong opinion 30 seconds ago, that's a really good point.
For consistency's sake, with once you're in that, like once you're in that tree, like and sorry, Wes is giving some comments here.
Yeah, his point in the chat is like you would want it to be opt-in, so like you specify workspace root or something, and that also could work. I could also see that when you type npm install at the root, in the root, that it puts an npm rc in each workspace, child workspace, that sets the workspace root for you. And that way you can always override it, but and it wouldn't like, if it already existed, it wouldn't change it. But like that feels less magic to me, because then it's magically creating explicit config that you can override and change later versus magically doing a different thing. Because then if I wanted to like wipe out my symlinks and like just reinstall everything at the local level, I could do npm install workspace root dot, right?
I see. So we are currently working on this week npm init to be workspace aware. So you can imagine what that might mean is that we make it so that we will actually create a workspace definition in package JSON for you when you run npm init -w. What you're suggesting with generating also an npm RC file then inside that workspace that maps some config back to, you know, that root, that parent,
Right.
might be an interesting proposal or an interesting addition.
Yeah. I mean, that has the
create this
advantage of
behavior.
what Wes is talking about, where it's explicitly opt-in, but it also has the advantage of implicitly being what most people are probably going to want. And doing it on init is good, but that's also only going to work for people that are starting a new project with the feature. It seems reasonable to me to just do it on install, because anything that they've indicated as a workspace like that, you know, and if they don't like that behavior, then they can, you know, yeah, I guess we could do it. That's true. We could do an NPM workspace in it that's specifically designed to convert an existing project to use NPM workspaces. That's a really good idea. That's probably better than doing it on install, because I think, yeah, I think the number of people that have manually converted to workspaces so far is small, and those people are willing to experiment.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's I like that. NPM workspace init and NPM init workspace aware would both set this workspace root NPM RC in each child workspace, and that workspace root would be used to decide if a command should look up the tree for, or, you know, look to that root, right? And obviously, if you went to that root and the place you came from wasn't a child workspace defined in that root, it should error. Right. But as long as that matched, then like it won't do anything bizarre, and it'll, yeah, that seems like a nice package that.
So
yeah.
I feel like I don't know where to capture that, because it sounds like it's net, like the idea of a workspace root definition or config is definitely net new. But I feel like we could give that feedback in this RFC specifically, that it's like tangentially, this is exposing, you know, like how do we map this relationship, right? Like how would the logic work in this current RFC that's proposed? You know, how right now it seems pretty we're assuming a lot here. And so like making it explicit it sounds like your feedback, Jordan, would be to introduce a net new config that can be set in an NPM-RC file, and then how that gets generated, like that's another tangent for like we can do NPM init or NPM workspace init that would allow for that to be generated for you. But also you can manually create that relationship. Yeah, I like it. It's interesting. I think we're going to want to increase workspace adoption over the next quarter. So like something like this that makes it easier, including like that, what you just hit on there, like in terms of adoption, like getting folks to adopt this again, that whole story would be very attractive for us to work on and clean up as we go forward here. So so yeah, any features and functionality like that, like I think would be beneficial. So yeah, we want to just reduce the confusion. So the thing is, I'm just concerned that like still, if somebody runs, let's say npm install inside of a workspace directory and they don't have this configuration set up, at, you know, what's the expectation? What is their like, you know, what are we, you know?
Well, yeah, I think I can see having both expectations. One expectation is it behaves as if it was a project by itself, because I CD'd into it. The other expectation is the context aware thing. And it seems like a nice bridge to make it really easy for the default to be the context aware, but also make it really easy to override that default by making it really explicit. That's kind of what I like about the thing I'm typing up now on this RFC.
Awesome. Thank you. Yeah, thank you for giving that feedback. Cool. Wes, I see you made a couple of notes here. The workspace in there is great. And helping get folks set up would be great. Also just want to make sure that I note this. We want to make sure that the root is only allowed to be a parent directory. The workspace root is only allowed to be a parent directory. So that makes a lot of sense. So that like essentially the directory has to be nested, has to be a child of that root, and not set outside of the directive parents. Yes. So we've heard like linked workspaces are essentially a workspace that's outside of the root right now won't install. So that's like just I consider that to be a feature right now. Some people think it's a bug, but yeah, if you've like symlinked something somewhere, like, I don't know, that might be problematic. We should be improving the link experience, which I know is something you care a lot about, Wes. So yeah, this also makes me want to have npm init package in workspace packages foo. Interesting. Okay. Yeah, so I think this was kind of what we were considering with the work that we're doing right now to make npm init workspace aware, was that by providing a -w, then it would initialize that workspace and create that relationship as a workspace definition in your package JSON. But what you're saying here, Wes, it sounds like you would also love to be able to init a package inside of then the workspace. So it's almost like the context, the working directory context that you'd like to change. So yeah, if you can, feel free to add some more feedback to the actual RFC itself. So this is, this came out of the work that Roy's been doing with making our commands workspace aware. So it's, this was something that we weren't thinking about like last year and couldn't have been thinking about until we started to really get into doing the work. So cool. So just to be mindful of time, we've got 4 minutes left, and we have a discussion here that I want to bring up because we've been asked about this multiple times. I know we don't have a ton of time here, but we've been getting feedback since npm 7 launched about the changes to npm update and the fact that you cannot update package JSON via npm update. We only update package locks, and that the recommendation right now for folks is that if you want to update your package JSON, is that you use npm install to update your deps. And this is a bit tedious for folks since they used to be able to update all their dependencies at one time in v6 using npm update. And so I want to bring this up because right now we don't have a mechanism in v7. Before, you could essentially explicitly opt out of saving with no save, since the behavior with v6 was that npm update would automatically update the package JSON. So now people have asked us, and not just this person here in this discussion 270, but people have asked us explicitly, what is the flag or what is the way to do this? And it seems like a common pattern that people are asking for. So I'm essentially bringing this up as a discussion topic. I'm not sure if we already have the flag that we can reuse, or we have a way to like thread this needle. I doubt that we're gonna just roll back the behavior. It's gonna have to be opt-in again, whether it's npm update or it's npm install that like essentially allows you to update package JSON again. My head is leaning towards the fact that we'll have to have some config that essentially does this for update or install. So does anybody have any thoughts or feelings around this? Have you run into this yourselves? Was this surprising when we changed this behavior?
Reading about it feels like it should be surprising, but npm update probably since like npm, in npm 3 or something, was like a dangerous command to run. So I've been operating for years on the very strict muscle memory of no one ever use npm update, only npm install explicit things. So I just haven't used it in many years, but like the explanations seem reasonable.
Right. So, for the developer experience and the ergonomics, like I feel like we do want to like support this workflow, like that if somebody wants to update all of their dependencies at the same time to the latest versions in their package JSON, we should allow them some mechanism for them to do that. So
I actually find this funny because I was struggling. I thought npm update did this, and I was trying to do this the other day. Because just like on my personal projects, I don't care. I'll run it, and if it breaks, cool, I can fix the thing that broke. Like they're not massively complex. And I was very confused why I just couldn't get away to like update my dependencies. I was extremely confused. So this, I'm glad I was here for this because this makes sense. I would hugely support some way to do this, potentially reverting or, doing back, resetting npm install or sorry, npm update or whatever you want to do in this, potentially having like an update interactive or something. Where update you can step through to avoid Jordan's concern of this blasts away everything and I have to do a lot of work to figure it out. And like if I update one module and then like run npm test and it's fine, cool, I can go on, like I can move on to the next one. I think that would be good. I think that also potentially has benefits for tools like Dependabot and rest in peace Greenkeeper and stuff like that. So yeah, I would love to see that. That's something that I was actually thinking about coming into this meeting. So I would, very much love to see that, and especially some kind of incremental one, which theoretically wouldn't be too hard. So
yeah,
theoretically.
I apologize. I see Ricky, you joined us, and then we're basically at time, and this was actually your discussion that I linked here. I totally just realized that while on the call. Did you have any like comments you want to give before we try to wrap things up here about this specifically? If not, Ricky, are you there? I think I saw you turn on your camera there for a second.
Yeah, I'm here. Yeah. Actually, we use this a lot, especially in our team. We use the update, npm update we do a lot of RNBs in our platform. So we usually do npm updates and we push the updates to our devs. So it's right now we're having what you call this? We're having hard time monitoring the changes in terms of which version is running on which servers because of the changes of npm 7. Before we automatically can detect which packages are being run on the servers or on each dev's computers based on the package that JSON. So
have you used log files or no?
Yeah, we use the log files, but since we use different types of servers like Windows, Linux based, so usually we just inform the team if there's update or we're trying a new version, package version. Right now, what we do is we send a group message or an email to the team to specify which versions are being updated on the package lock.json.
Okay.
So
and do you say explicitly, like in the package JSON, is it explicit version, or do you allow for ranges like in package JSON then? Like
we specify versions right now.
Okay. I see. So you're tracking them and you were being very explicit, like update and have the specific version and not like a caret or range or anything like that. You want to be very explicit in your package JSON about what version you're getting.
Yeah, especially if there's especially if there's a wreckage because of a minor update on the package. So we really want to specify which versions they need to install.
Okay. Interesting. Okay. So maybe we can have some more discussion in the actual thread that you created about your scenario specifically. I know we're a few minutes over time, so I apologize we didn't get you more involved there earlier.
It's okay.
But yeah, this is definitely, we'll keep this on the agenda if that's okay. We'll keep it on for next week as well. So we'll bring this back up and talk about this next week if you want to join us then as well. But we can talk async in the discussion thread about maybe some of your use cases. Like I said, this might actually be something that we can reintroduce, like this ability for your people to do, because you're not the only person that's said that they used to use this like npm update in v6 like and expect that it's going to update all their versions in package JSON as well as the log file. So yeah. Okay. Apologize though, we are 5 minutes over now, so I'm going to do my best to summarize and add notes back to the meeting notes doc, and feel free to continue to add comments and feedback in the RFCs themselves, and I'll see you all next week at the same time, same place, and thank you for joining today. Cheers.
Yeah.